user story will have, you would state who you are as a particular role, so as a product owner, and then you want to state what it is that you need. Well, I need to be able to ... And then you have just a short kind of clause or point about what's the benefit. It doesn't have to be elaborate. The point is to make it consumable and just to speak about specific things. So as a product owner, I need to be able to access such and such content in this way so that I can blah, blah, blah. And really by trying to make it specific and really stating within the stream of what it is you're trying to do, what the benefit is, and who you are, and then you'll build in some acceptance criteria, you really limit the potential scope creep that often happens with waterfall, where people start going on and on about requirements. It sets you on a path that spins way out of control. This really helps to contain everything. Delivering items in very short iterations. As I mentioned before, the real key is to get a build out as soon as possible. And as many builds as you can throughout the process, the better. That means, of course, that there needs to be some tolerance. You're not going to get the, a beautiful polished draft when you get something out just for the sake of getting feedback early. And there needs to be that acceptance amongst all the participants. But the earlier and the more frequent the iterations, the better. And to that point also, there really needs to be a focus on early directional views and function. So as soon as it's realistic and possible to get something somewhat functioning, there could be bugs, it could have its warts and all, but you want to get something out and exposed to the folks who are writing the user stories to start talking about, is this what you're talking about? Is this kind of capturing the benefit? Or do you kind of see where we're going? Are we in the right direction? Incorporating that feedback and adjusting things accordingly. So in the very beginning, there's a process that we call solution visualization, which is really, taking a look at what's the vision for my product. What is it that I want to ultimately bring to the market? And this is a really great, it's a great experience because if you can get, as most products, especially you have content technology, all different folks from different facets of the business coming together, sitting in the same room, and you say, what do you see as the end vision for this product? You're going to immediately get very different points of view. So getting people together, having a kind of limited amount of time, maybe 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever it might be, to really hash out what it is people want from this endeavor, really helps bring people onto the same page, getting a common vision, which is really the critical success factor for any new product development. And getting people on board in the spirit of things and really laying out everything in terms of how the teams will be structured and what the time frames are, the iterations, etc. A key about Agile is the ability to add, change, and remove the requirements or the user stories as needed. So along with the methodology of getting out early and many iterations, you have the ability to give the feedback and to alter course as need be. So it's not ironclad where you, as in waterfall, where there needs to be, some, gate, and there has to be the people get very vested in the way things are happening because it's longer, it's more costly, and therefore the need to kind of turn the battleship becomes that much more difficult to do. Whereas in Agile, it's more like little speedboats. You might have a fleet of speedboats versus a battleship, much more able to kind of turn direction and make adjustments. And just in this day and age with new technology developments happening all the time and the whole market really emerging, you need that flexibility to be able to change course as need be. The initial set of requirements that come out of the solution visualization, those are the user stories, and kind of a higher level user story is called an epic, which is kind of the level above that. Those are maintained. So you might, in the beginning of the solution visualization, you might build 20 user stories and, 5 epics, but in terms of that first iteration chunk, maybe you can only handle 5 or 6 user stories. You keep the others in the backlog, and as those user stories start to be accepted by the iterations, then you pull in another user story. So it's a matter of, in Agile, it's called backlog management. The user interface wireframes, that's a real key. Again, a difference with waterfall. Typically in waterfall, you'll have the user interface kind of happening towards the end. You'll have inputs, obviously, throughout the process, but the user interface is really only exposed when you have that first release, which could be well into, or typically towards the very end of the product development cycle. Whereas in Agile, when you get that first iteration, or one of the early iterations at the very least, you want to have something up there in terms of a UI or a wireframe. You want people to really be focusing on the user experience from the get-go versus just generic requirements. You want to always put it back to the user. What is this going to look like? How do they interact with this? And when you have those iterations, you want feedback so you can keep updating those UIs. And the content requirements, and this is really key, and often I've seen this is something that doesn't get the level of attention and scrutiny that it should, is really understanding from the beginning of what does my content need to be able to do to support this functionality, and bringing that back into updating the schema, the metadata, however it is, but really having a keen focus on the content model from the get-go. And that, in many ways, until you can really see the content in the application, you don't really know what you have yet. So that's another real key about the Agile iterative process. You need to really see the combination, really, between the UI, the content, and the technology, how everything fits together in the glove. And from that, decide what you need to do. You really can't look at these things as independently. So, as I mentioned before, the short iterations is a real key benefit of Agile. I've mentioned some of this already. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, again, a real key point here is just the ability to incorporate feedback directly into the process as you move forward, and keep elaborating and refining the user stories and the requirements, and making it a continual improving endeavor. Some key Agile principles. I've worked on several new product development using Agile initiatives, and I think originally, obviously, Agile was meant more for development, but it can be adapted, and there's a real benefit in terms of new products. But a point is, your organization might not be ready to take it whole hog, and I think there are some key principles which can be incorporated to different degrees depending on your organization. Those are really the time boxing, which is just the general concept of really limiting the amount of time that goes into certain key steps within the project. So you might really say for an iteration, for example, you want to have iteration 1 in 3 weeks. You've got all these user stories, and at the solution visualization, let's say, you've planned out 7 or 8 user stories to be done. Turns out only 4 or 5 are done. You still put out that first iteration. It's not going to have what you initially thought, but you say whatever's done within that 3-week time box window, you're going to push that out. And it really makes people focus on getting something that can be seen, kind of touched, smelled, and where people can give some feedback. Get it out there and get that feedback. That's the real key here. And it also, as those of you who've really worked on a lot of waterfall projects, it contains the scope creep, which just, it's just endemic to any waterfall process. So you say, I need to get something out. Well, naturally, your instinct is going to be to actually, decrease the scope if you need to get something usable out there, and to have the folks continually reprioritizing the different functionalities and the user stories, so that you make sure what's out there is the most important thing. And that's a real key point. With a lot of waterfall projects, you have this kind of big bang approach, and you've got all this effort and great thought, put into the entire initiative, but it's not constantly reprioritized and reshaped. And that's often a death blow. The cross-functional teams, again, from the very beginning, the more you can get technology, content, and UI folks together in the same room and get them to understand each other, the better off you're going to be. Now that poses some problems because it takes a while to kind of get folks speaking the same language, really understanding what happens. In a typical agile development project, which would be more, let's say, software focused, you have people who are continually working together. I mean, a typical sprint team, for example, could work for a year or 2 years, putting something out, let's say, every 3 weeks. And over the first 3 or 4 sprints, they kind of get the groove, they understand each other. There's something called a velocity of how much the team can put out. You can start predicting how long it's going to take to do future builds. Here it's a little different. Typically with a new product, while you might have several new iterations of the product itself that gets released live, you're not going to have these folks working, on a continual basis for a year or 2 years. So it will be a little rough in the beginning, but it's really well worth the effort. Iterations and thick skins. This is a big issue. People obviously take pride in what they do, or you hope that they do. And for development or UI to basically have to put something out that isn't really ready for prime time, and while it's to the internal customers that they're showing early iterations, to show the bubblegum and the scotch tape is sometimes, it's a little bit of humble pie, and it can be tough to do. And people looking at it are going to be very quick. I mean, I work a lot with editors. Editors are picky. I was one too. And they're going to point out where the flaws are. But the point is that we want flaws in the early iterations. We'd much rather have flaws, but get something out there. And that's kind of a mode of thinking that really needs to carry through in an agile method. And again, getting that early view is so important. You get that early feedback, and from those early views too, that's when you can often say, am I heading towards the vision we talked about? And if not, you can change course pretty quickly. And that is so important in a lot of these projects, especially when you're integrating distinct functional areas, the content, technology, and UI. So in summary, a Genica study said that 75% of business and IT executives think their software projects will fail. Well, that's not a ringing endorsement, if you ask me, about traditional ways of doing this. And I think what that really says is you need to have the ability to quickly scale back, readjust, flip on a dime if you have to. And that really speaks loudly to the agile methodology. Same point, the waterfall, it's very difficult to change. You've got a lot of people vested in a funded, kind of long-streamed, often, CapEx kind of initiative. And there are a lot of consequences, job security including, in shifting something where your organization has pumped a lot of money looking at a 2 or 3 year plan. So there's a lot of incentive not to try to change in waterfall, whereas agile, you really try to turn that on its head. I'm just going to talk about the benefits to agile, just to reiterate those again. You mitigate the risk of cost and schedule overruns. So by having these iterations, constant meetings, just even having the cross-pollination of the folks from content technology and UI, before there's an iteration, you can immediately become aware of some key potential obstacles, and you can address those right up front, instead of kind of being able to first see that at a release in waterfall. The speed with which new products can get launched is a huge benefit to agile, because you're going to have a little bit of growing pains, you're going to have the bubblegum and scotch tape in the beginning potentially, but you're going to get a product out there. And it's up to the stakeholders and others to make determinations about, is this product ready for prime time, and you can adjust accordingly. But the point is, by getting iterations out and early drafts running, it really puts in play the whole idea of being able to get things out, get things done. And that's often a big issue too with these large initiatives, where it's only at that first giant release that people say, gee, can we do this? Can it really happen? Whereas in Agile, you might have had 3 or 4 iterations up to that point, and you kind of know you're building towards it. You've got the confidence that it can work. And again, the early views of the content in the digital product, you need to have, you know, the risk of running a baseball analogy, but you've got to have that ball in the glove to kind of see if you're going to catch it properly. And until you see how the content and the content model respond, react, interact with the technology and the UI, you don't really know what's going on until that happens. So it's that integration of the three that you want to start building on as early as possible. Just a quick case study, and this is really highlighting an agile methodology for a new product for a legal publisher that was launched you know, in very short time, relatively. It would have taken about 2 years to launch. You know, it was a well-regarded print product, and you know, it was one of those where it just is begging to be digitized. People would have Post-its all over it, which was their own internal bookmarks, and they'd be scribbling on the pages, and you know, you'd have some bookmarks on the you know, on the vertically, some horizontally, and it really was saying, you know, we need something more interactive here. And really through Agile, it was done in 6 months, on time, within budget. There were many iterations. It was a first Agile program within this particular company, and there were issues with the early builds, with the bubblegum, scotch tape, some of the warts, but you know, when people realized the value of seeing those early iterations and being able to incorporate more feedback, refine the search criteria, there's a whole host of potential issues that were exposed early on that were then able to be fixed and incorporated into the final version that was released within the 6-month time frame. And it really, you know, it's continuing into a next release to the marketplace. It's received very high praise. This is something that Innodata worked with. And it really is a testament to the value of being able in the digital age to incorporate these changes quickly across different departments. And as a result, this company is really switching its entire mindset in terms of methodology over to Agile. Wonder if there are any questions? No? I was going to say we could have it like a Merv Griffin if you want to sit up here and we can chat. I'll give you some coffee. Just one little story, and this might seem a little off topic, but you know, this weekend I had to install a satellite antenna into my car. And as I was thinking about this talk, you know, I realized, well, you know, I could follow the instructions to the T, kind of a waterfall method, where it says the first step is to glue the mount into my dashboard. And I said, well, I'm not ready to glue anything right now, knowing my, you know, ineptitude when it comes to mechanics. So I took more of an agile approach. I said, well, all right, let me kind of put the piece here. I'm not going to glue it. And let me start now weaving the antenna, you know, from the up on the top of the back of the car and weaving it through the weather stripping. And as I'm going, I'm realizing, you know, the instructions didn't really talk about, you know, how to weave it through here. And my car's a little different, so you know what, I'm going to mount it on the other side. And as I get through, I'm going to weave it through this door, not the door that they suggested, because my car is a little bit different. And finally, when I got to the end, I realized I had changed, I don't know, 10% of what the instructions kind of told me out of the box, because I know my car, or I learned my car as I was doing it. I learned the best way to, where to put this antenna, how to launch the, how to mount the radio, where it goes, that's best for me and my car and my experience there. And at the risk of stretching things too far, it really was a very agile way of thinking. And I think in many ways that's a way to think about your products. You know, and the folks who are in the room with solution visualization, they know what it is that needs to go out into the market. They know their particular functional areas very well. And only until you can kind of see this new concept that brings things together with that vision and how it kind of drives and fits with those functional areas, can you say, yeah, this feels right, or no, I kind of have to make an adjustment. This isn't quite what I was thinking of as the content owner. And you make adjustments. It's natural. And it's the way, you know, no methodology is going to fully solve anything out of the box. But the key is if you can keep kind of seeing how it fits, how does that shoe fit, and keep making adjustments, that's just a natural way that's going to really lead to an experience at the end that really meets everyone's needs and requirements. So kind of, I guess, ending on satellite radios and Agile. Are there any questions? No? All right. Well, thank you all very much.